Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let us continue on talking about Qaida number 13.
And when it comes to the muhrim, killing the land game animal, then we need to make a condition that it must be done on purpose. So if he kills one by accident, then he is overlooked, so he's not taken into account, and he does not need to offer the jaza. This is because killing the game animal is a right against Allah, which you have violated. Now if you do this out of ignorance or forgetfulness or being forced to do so, then you are overlooked and you don't need to offer the kafara or the jaza, which is to sacrifice a similar animal from the bahimatul an'am and to feed the poor of the haram. But if the rights of Allah are overlooked due to somebody making a genuine mistake, such as killing a game animal by way of genuine mistake, then what do we say about accidental killing? Because we find that with accidental killing, there is a kafara which you have to offer, even if it was an accidental killing. Now, paying the blood money is fine. That's the right of the other person, so you fulfill that. But what about the kafara? Because that's a right of Allah Jalla wa Ala, is it not? So therefore, if you killed somebody by accident, do we not need to overlook this kafara? We say no, and this is a glaring exception to the general rule, that when it comes to killing another person, who is a non-animal of course, then this is a much more serious act, and there is a kafara due on you, even if it was accidental killing. It's just that you're not sinful with Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So notice the difference then between accidentally killing a game animal whilst in the state of ihram, there is nothing upon you, and accidentally killing son of Adam. In both cases you're not sinful, but with the latter case, killing the son of Adam, you have to offer the kafara, because this life is far more sacred. And it just goes to show that the sanctity of the life of son of Adam is given by Allah Jalla wa Ala. So without the iman in Allah, human life simply has no intrinsic value, or at least no more value than other animals. We now move on to Qaida number 14. التلف في يد الأمين غير مضمون إذا لم يتعدى أو يفرط. Any destruction of wealth in the hand of the Amin is not to be paid back if he did not make ta'addi, which is overstep the limit, or tafrit, which is gross negligence. وفي يد الظالم مضمون مطلقا. But any destruction of wealth in the hand of the zalim or the oppressor is to be paid back without any restrictions. أو يقال, or it can be said, ما ترتب على المأذون فيه فهو غير مضمون والعكس بالعكس. So an alternative way of saying it is that whatever results from that which the Sharia has permitted, then this is not to be paid back. So it's not a liability, and the opposite is true for the opposite. Firstly, what is an Amin? We explained this before, but it is the person who takes possession of somebody else's wealth, either through the permission of the owner of the wealth or the permission of the Shari', the lawgiver, which is Allah Jalla wa Ala. So you could be a wadir, where some wealth is deposited with you to look after, or you could be a wakil. You're going to trade or do something with another person's wealth as he has instructed. Or you could be an ajir, when you take hold of an item which has been rented out. You could be a murtahin, somebody who takes the pledge from the buyer. Or you could be a sharik, which is a business partner. A mudarib, again a business partner, the one who travels out to sell the product which has been given to him by the owner of the products. You could be a wasi, somebody who is in charge of giving the wasiyah or the bequest to those to whom it belongs. You could be a wali, a guardian, so you're going to safeguard somebody else's wealth, for example the orphan's wealth. You could be a nadhir, and this is pertaining to the waqf. Somebody leaves behind a waqf and you take possession of it because you're going to look after this waqf and make sure that whatever the deceased person has stipulated comes into effect. So all of these are examples of an Amin, one who takes possession of a property or wealth due to the permission of either the owner of the wealth or the Shari'. If this property is destroyed without any ta'addi or tafrid on his part, then he does not have to pay back the property, he does not stand as a guarantor. And this is what an amana is all about. An Amin is the one who has an amana, a trust. So if the property is destroyed in his hands, meaning the hands of the Amin, then it is exactly as if the property was destroyed in the hands of the owner. Now the owner obviously does not have to pay himself back, that would be absurd, and the same ruling applies to the Amin. However, if the Amin is guilty of at-ta'addi or tafriq, then he does stand as a guarantor. At-tafriq is when you leave off doing something which was obligatory upon you to do, and at-ta'addi is where you do something which you should not have done. Many ulama say that the musta'ir, the one who borrows an item to use it, so he borrows a particular item, let's say a car, to be used, then he does stand as a guarantor if the item is destroyed or damaged in other than what it was meant to be used for. So if you're going to use a car, for example, then of course there will be some wear and tear. Or any other item for that matter, there will be wear and tear as you use it, and so he's not a guarantor for that. But if it is damaged in other than what it is meant to be used for, then he is a guarantor, regardless of ta'addi or tafriq. And the other opinion on this issue, which is the more correct opinion, is that the ariyah, the item which is lent, then this is just like an amana. So that the musta'ir, the one who takes possession of the lent item, so he's the one who borrows it, if this item is destroyed or damaged without any ta'addi or tafriq on his part, then he's not a guarantor, just like an amin. But what about this situation? If he borrows a car to travel to a particular country, let's say country A, and this is the agreement between him and the owner of the wealth, but instead of traveling to country A, he travels to country B and the car is damaged. Is he a guarantor? Here the answer is yes, because the owner of the wealth only lent him this car so that he can travel to country A. If the owner had known that he wanted to go to country B, then perhaps he would not have lent him the car. So here the borrower proved to be treacherous, and hence he is not an amin, not somebody who can be trusted. Similarly, if somebody borrows a saw to cut wood, and so the owner of the saw gives him the saw, but instead of cutting the wood, he cuts metal, and the saw is damaged. Is he a guarantor? The answer is yes, because if the owner had known that he wanted to cut metal, he would not have given him the saw. So if you borrow an item, and the agreement is that you're going to use the item for a particular purpose, so this is a very specific purpose, but then you use it for another purpose which was not agreed to, then you are a guarantor. Because why did you not make this clear beforehand? As for if some wealth comes to your hand whilst you are not an amin, so you usurp it, then it makes no difference whether you are guilty of ta'addi or tafriq, you are a guarantor. Because the fact that this wealth is in your hand in the first place makes you guilty of ta'addi. So you are a muta'addi, one who oversteps the mark or does something which he should not be doing. So for example, let's say there is something in your possession and the owner of the wealth asks for it and you refuse to give it to him. Now in this period where you have refused to give it to him, you are considered to be a ghasib, one who usurps another person's wealth. And in all cases you stand as a guarantor. What about if he finds the possession of his neighbor or someone else in his garden? Let's say a towel flies from his neighbor's house to his garden. What is obligatory upon him? It is obligatory upon him to return this towel, because it is not a problem simply to return the towel to your neighbor or to somebody in your neighborhood. As for if it is difficult to return the item, maybe the owner is too far away or perhaps it's too heavy to carry or the like, then he must at least inform the person so that the person himself can come and take it. If he has to take it to the owner and this incurs some cost, meaning traveling cost, then the owner of the wealth would have to reimburse the person who brought him his wealth. As for if he does not even inform the owner of the wealth, then he is a sinful person and treated as a ghasib, in which case he is a guarantor for any destruction of this wealth. Thus the causes of being a guarantor are three. Firstly, if you're a ghasib, somebody who's usurped the wealth. Secondly, if you directly undertake the destruction of the wealth without due right. For example, you kick a football and it smashes into your neighbor's greenhouse. And thirdly, when you do something which causes destruction of the other person's wealth. For example, letting out your grazing livestock by night time. Now, if your grazing livestock damages somebody else's property by entering into the private land, then although the animal directly undertook the destruction, but you cannot take the animal to account, but you will be taken into account because you caused this destruction. So the causes of the daman or guarantee are these three. Now we move on to qaida number 15. La darara wa la dirar. There should be no darar, nor there should be any dirar. What is the difference? Well, darar is to say that we need to remove any harm, whether it is done intentionally or unintentionally. Any harmful effects must be removed from the society. As for dirar, then this has the idea that you're doing it with somebody, and so this is the harm done intentionally to someone else, because you could cause some harm either unintentionally or intentionally. So if you cause harm to somebody unintentionally, then you have caused darar. If you cause harm to somebody intentionally, then you have caused dirar. And this qaida is actually taken directly from a hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad and other sources, in which the Prophet simply said, La darar wa la dirar. So we simply say it is impermissible for you to cause harm on someone else, be it from your speech or your physical action, or any cause whatsoever without due right. And specifically against those people who have a more emphasized right over you, like your near kindred, your neighbor, your friends, and the poor and the orphan. And you find dirar happening much. Even if it be a banana skin somebody throws on the pavement, this is dirar, or anything else for that matter, which causes some inconvenience to the pedestrians. Even if it is in your own property, things which you can do as you wish, so you would think you can do in your own house as you want to, but this is not the case, because you could be, let's say, playing the radio in a loud volume, and this would clearly annoy the neighbor. So we say no, even though you own the radio and you can do as you wish, but playing it in a loud volume would annoy the neighbor, hence you are committing haram. And an example of a severe form of dirar is a husband harming his wife so that she would ask for a khula and give back the mahr. Allah says, وَلَا تُضَارُّوهُنَّ لِتُضَيِّقُوا عَلَيْهِنْ, and do not harm them so as to make their lives constricted. Also he says, وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا, and do not keep them, meaning your wives, and you harm them at the same time, because there you would be a transgressor. Likewise, one parent could harm the other parent using the child. Allah says, وَلَا تُضَارَّ وَالِدَةٌ بِوَلَدِهَا وَلَا مَوْلُودٌ لَهُ بِوَلَدِهِ. The mother should not be harmed on account of her child, nor the father be harmed on account of his child. Likewise he says, وَلَا يُضَارَّ كَاتِبٌ وَلَا شَهِيدٌ. The writer or the witness should not cause any harm. And this is the intentional harm. This could mean that the writer or the witness should not harm the owner of the right, or it could also be interpreted that the owner of the right should not harm the writer of the transaction, nor the witness of the transaction. We can also add here that the qadi should not make life difficult for the witness. So if the witness says, yes, I testify that person A sold his computer to person B, the qadi should not ask unnecessary and deep questions like, are you also sure that the conditions of the sales transactions were met and any preventative factors were not present? This is not the point here. The point is that the witness has testified that the sales contract went ahead, and this should be enough. But to ask so many questions of this nature so as to make life difficult for the shahid, this is not necessary and should not be done. This is dirar, and this could lead to the witness retracting from his testimony, and what this would lead to is that the person who is due the right would not receive his right, because there's nothing to prove it for him. However, if the qadi or the opponent has some doubts in his mind about the testimony, then you could inquire further, for example, when did the trade take place, or what day did the trade take place. This would be just to put their minds at rest. Also from the issue of mudarra or dirar is the inheritors. When a person dies, he has wealth which he leaves behind. Before the wealth is distributed amongst the inheritors, you have to pay off any debts which he owes. This is easy enough because the creditors are going to come looking for the debt, and so this would be simple and straightforward enough. But also, before the inheritance is divided, you need to take out the wasiyah which he has given, if he has given any wasiyah. Now this does not have anyone coming to the inheritors demanding his rights. This is something which you yourself have to take out from your own initiative, and you don't have anyone breathing down your throat demanding their rights. Because of this difference, it could be more difficult for the inheritors to take out the wasiyah, simply because this means that they will receive less. But if they did not take out the wasiyah, then this would harm the person to whom the wasiyah is due. So this would be dirar. Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the ayah of inheritance, من بعد وصية يوصى بها أو دين غير مضار. After the wasiyah has been taken out and also the debt after that has been taken out, and not harming anyone. So the inheritors are not allowed to harm the creditor, so they must give him back his debt, and also the musa lahu, the one to whom the bequest belongs, they must not harm him either. So everyone must receive their due rights. Only then the inheritors will receive their due rights. So just like the servant of Allah is forbidden from causing harm without due right, he is ordered to make ihsan, or to do good or well everything which he does. وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And do good, Allah loves those who do good. And Allah has prescribed ihsan on everything which you do, even when it comes to taking a life. When you sacrifice an animal, for example, do it well, so you sharpen the blade, and this will give respite to the animal, because a blunt blade will cause pain. And even when you have to kill somebody in a had punishment, you do this well, because somebody might say, well, he's going to die anyway, so let's just have a bit of fun with him before we kill him. No, this is not ihsan. And ihsan means that you do it in accordance with the sharia. For example, we know in the Sahih that a man killed a servant girl by crushing her head between two boulders, and he did this because he wanted some jewelry which she had. So the Prophet ordered that this man be killed in exactly the same way, and this is qisas. Now somebody may say, but how is this a good way to kill somebody? This clearly causes some pain and agony, and it is difficult even to watch. We say no, this is ihsan, because ihsan is to do it the way the sharia orders you. So if he kills him with electricity, then we also kill him with electricity. If he strangled him, we also strangle him. And likewise, the adulterer is stoned to death. Somebody may say, but this is horrible to look at. Absolutely, it's horrible to look at. But then again, the sin he committed is also equally as horrible. And the ihsan is to do it the way the sharia has prescribed it. So if we think about it, this is justice, because just as he experienced the pleasure throughout his body in committing this haram action, so now he must experience pain throughout his whole body. Of course, if somebody kills another person by putting so much alcohol in him, then we would not kill this person by making him drink so much alcohol, because drinking alcohol is haram in and of itself. Thus we would have to resort to the sword. Let us now move to qaida number 16. العدل واجب في كل شيء والفضل مسنون. Justice is obligatory in everything, and grace is recommended. What is al-adl? That you give what is upon you to give, just as you demand your right which belongs to you. And al-fadl is to give more than what is required of you to give, or that you should give something which was not required of you to give in the very first place. So for example, you could donate £100 to somebody, and this is just al-ihsan al-asli, just giving something which was not required in the very first place for you to give. Or for example, on the other hand, you could give something more than what was required of you to give. So for example, you owe somebody £100, and when it comes to paying back your debt, you give him back £110, but this was not stipulated at the time of contracting the loan. Now this extra £10 is a fadl from you. And so with this qaida we realize that the deen of al-Islam is a deen of adl, a deen of justice. It is not a deen of equality. Allah Jalla wa Ala neither orders equality nor praises equality. In fact, the times in which we find equality mentioned in the Quran, it is mentioned in the negative context. So for example in Surah Al-Hadid, لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل. Not equal from you are those who spent before the conquest of Mecca and fought also before the conquest. So these types of people are superior to the ones who spent in the way of Allah and fought after the conquest, because then life for the Muslims became easier in the Arabian Peninsula. In Surah Al-An'am he says, هل يستوي الأعمى والبصير? Are the blind and the one who can see equal? Of course, it's a rhetorical question. قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ in Surah Al-Zumar. Are the ones who know equal to the ones who don't know? Again, a rhetorical question, telling us that of course they are not equal. And there are many such ayat. Adl, or justice on the other hand, is to give everyone what they are due. But then the question is, who decides what they are due? And from the Islamic perspective, the answer is all too easy. Allah Jalla wa Ala
decides what they are due, just like with everything else. Okay, let us take a few review questions. Question number 1. Define what we mean by an Amin, which is translated to trustworthy person. Question number 2. What are the 3 causes that we mentioned that one can become a guarantor for destroyed property? And question 3. If someone were to ask you that stoning the adulterer to death is an ugly punishment and it is not ihsan, yet Allah Jalla wa Ala prescribes ihsan, so is this not a contradiction? How would you reply?